This month on Weekly in Sports, the matchups for Elimination Chamber have been made official. We'll take a look at the field for the Elimination Chamber. During monthly headlines, we'll also take a look at spring trading. It has opened up. Spring training has opened up and is in session. In the 2 games the Blue Jays have played so far to this point, at the time of our recording, how have they done? What's the news around Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? Plus, are the Penguins playoff material, or are they once again going to miss the playoffs? All this right now on Weekly in Sports. Let's get started. Welcome to What's Happening in the Sports World Today, hosted by your host of the Sports for Beginners podcast, Scott McGregor. Today, Scott has some exciting news for all of you listening today. I wonder what it could be, so let's find out and join Scott in the studio now. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Weekly in Sports. My name is Scott McGregor. I'm your host of the program, and I want to wish everyone a happy Monday. Of course, this is being recorded on a Monday, but it will drop on the Thursday in 3 days' time. So for the duration of the recording, happy Thursday. The Toronto Blue Jays are off today at the time of our recording. They will not go head-to-head with the Detroit Tigers due to inclement weather. But we'll get to that in a moment. Want to kick things off with, as always, monthly sports headlines. That's what we're going to kick things off with. Here we go. Monthly sports headlines. Down in the WWE, the Elimination Chamber matches have been made official. It will be John Cena versus... I'm going to bring up our feed here on the WWE Instagram page, because they made that official when the fields were official. But John Cena will indeed be taking on a couple of men. He will be taking on the one, the only, voice of the voiceless, CM Punk. He will also be facing off against Damian Priest, Logan Paul, Seth freaking Rollins, and the Scottish Warrior, Drew McIntyre. Meanwhile, on the women's end, this is for a matchup that will either see Rhea Ripley or Io Sky. One of those 2 women will go toe-to-toe with one of these 6 women Our field is Roxanne Perez versus Bayley versus Naomi versus Bianca Belair versus Liv Morgan versus the goddess Alexa Bliss. Alexa Bliss, Liv Morgan, Bianca, Naomi, Bayley, and Roxanne Perez fill up that spot at the Elimination Chamber this Saturday, as our time of recording is coming at the end of the month. For that matchup, our field for the men: Logan Paul, John Cena, the voice of the voiceless, CM Punk, Seth freaking Rollins, the visionary, the revolutionary, and of course, the Scottish warrior, Drew McIntyre, and El Campeón, Damian Priest. The action all happens internationally on Netflix at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, and streaming exclusively on Peacock in the US, again at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Central. Also confirmed for the matchups: destined to do this forever, it's unsanctioned. It's not official. It's unsanctioned. Sami Zayn will go one-on-one with Kevin Owens. Also official: we are looking at Nia Jax and Candice LeRae teaming up against the Hall of Famer, thank you Trish Stratus, and Tiffy time, Tiffany Stratton. She's got a match to prepare for at Wrestle Mania, because this past Friday on SmackDown, I should say the Friday before this past Friday on SmackDown, after successfully obtaining, I should say, or retaining her WWE Women's Championship, we found out that the one, the only, Tiffany Stratton was going to go one-on-one with the Queen, Charlotte Flair. And a week before that, on Monday Night Raw, we found out it will be JEY USO going up against the Ring General, Gunther, for the, yes I say for the, WWE World Heavyweight Championship. So on the men's side, the 6 men I just mentioned earlier are going head-to-head for a shot at main eventing WrestleMania and going for a shot at the one, the only, the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes, WWE Undisputed Championship. The Rock broke some news before he called out the American Nightmare, nearing the end of last Friday's Friday Night SmackDown. In fact, we're going to make it official. Next year, Saturday, April 11th to Sunday, April 12th, where Friday Night SmackDown was live, last Friday night, The Rock made it official. It's coming back to New Orleans, Louisiana. WWE Wrestle Mania is a go for New Orleans, which means coming back next year, the WWE will come back to New Orleans in 2026 at the Superdome for WrestleMania 42. On Saturday, though, The Rock is going to be at the Elimination Chamber to hear the answer from the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes will be expecting an answer to be The Rock's champion. He's already, I guess we could say, the people's champion. But we shall see. I've also been hearing reports that we are going to possibly see Becky Lynch return. The man. But enough about the WWE for now. I want to talk a little spring training. And we want to talk about some headlines out of Pittsburgh. One of the sad headlines coming out of Pittsburgh, besides their weekend matchups, and I'll get to the post-game show for the Rangers following this recording. That'll drop before this show drops anyways. One of the sad headlines coming out of Pittsburgh is on Wednesday last week, the Pittsburgh Penguins and all of the Pittsburgh community lost an icon known to the world as the voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Mike Lang passed away on Wednesday night, the night before the final event of the Four Nations tournament between Canada and the USA. And so, in response to the passing of Mike Lang, on Saturday, February 22nd, right before the Capitals and the Penguins were set to go to battle, the Penguins honored Mike's memory with a very special celebration ceremony celebrating the life of Mr. Lang. I ended, not to spoil the ending of the Capital post-game show, but ladies and gentlemen, I ended that post-game show when I did it on Saturday night at the end of the show. I ended that show talking about a line from Mike Lang himself. I ended that show with the special word that closed things out from DK Pittsburgh Sports Zone, Dan Kolajevic, DK himself. I ended it with a very special ending that happened at the end of that daily shot of Penguins when we found out Mike Lang had passed away. I'm going to quickly get over to it quickly before we wrap up headlines here, because I actually want to discuss my thoughts so far on the Blue Jays season in spring training. Now, I know a lot of fans are saying, but it's just spring training. Well, we'll get to that in just a moment, and I'll provide you some of my thoughts in just a moment as well. DK said at the end of his daily shot of Penguins honoring Mike Lang, he said, as such, the product was real, too. Mike Lang got the Penguins to 1984 when a tall, lanky teen from Laval, Quebec showed up, and the two of them, plus Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and so many more, took us through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Stanley Cup celebrations, all 5 with one man, immersing those events with one man at the mic. A part of all of us. A part of all of us has left the building. All right. Time now for a quick timeout. I'll get to my spring training thoughts down the road. But as we go on this show, but I want to take a quick timeout now. And our timeout is going to showcase, our quick timeout is going to showcase ourselves getting ready to talk all things Blue Jays. And after the timeout to talk all things Blue Jays, our first timeout of the show, we're going to get you set up for the next ball game the Blue Jays will be playing. Of course, by the time you hear this, that will either already be final or it might be canceled. We don't know. One thing we do know is that regardless on the situation, I'll talk a little bit about the spring training area when we come back after this quick break. And then I also want to talk about your monthly podcast recommendations. Monthly shout-outs of the week is coming up next after this break, and a quick discussion on the first 2 games so far played by the Toronto Blue Jays, with one particular topic that we're going to get into right after this commercial break. Stick with us.
Looking for conversations on the world of broadcasting, sports media, and from time to time, my favorite sports teams? Listen to Broadcast Map with me, Ali Musa. To learn more about the show and to view the upcoming schedule, like the Broadcast Map Facebook page. Search Broadcast Map.
Looking for a good hockey podcast that covers your favorite hockey teams and mine? Check out On the Ice and Behind the Benches, where we chat about our favorite hockey teams from puck drop to the last play of the action. To learn more, follow the On the Ice and Behind the Benches Facebook page. Search On the Ice and Behind the Benches. Welcome back to Weekly in Sports. It's another Weekly in Sports episode. It's the second episode of the new era. And why I say new era? Well, it's because in our second episode of our new era, we have now begun the podcast era of Weekly in Sports. And this episode, we've talked about the Elimination Chamber. We've talked about JEY Uso decision making. Charlotte Flair has made her decision. We also have set up the field for Elimination Chamber for the women and men Elimination Chamber matches. And we now know where all eyes are on for Wrestle Mania's second main event. We also want to talk about the Super Bowl. The Eagles knock off the Chiefs for their second Super Bowl title in franchise history. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But getting back to some spring training action, it was interesting. It was an interesting day for the Toronto Blue Jays when they opened up the season on Saturday. They defeated the New York Yankees by a final score of, as I open up my calendar here on the MLB app, they defeated the New York Yankees by a final score of 6-4 in Dunedin Park at TD Ballpark. And I'm not going to play it on this episode, but thanks to a very special friend of mine and Blue Jays fan in general, Thomas and myself, host of On the Ice and Behind the Benches, and myself, Scott McGregor, received a very special message from Blue Jays beat reporter. He was the Blue Jays beat reporter for a while, but has since been in part of other things. He does write for the Blue Jays from MLB.com. And that's the one and only Keegan Matheson. Shout out to Keegan if you're checking this out when it drops. Keegan, I know that you'll probably catch this after the ball game against Baltimore. But thank you so much, Keegan, for that wonderful message. Look forward to seeing you at some point this season. Who knows? Maybe our interactions might lead to having you on the podcast during the off season or during the break. We'll see. The other final I did catch all of the 6-4 Blue Jay victory over the Yankees, but I didn't catch an exciting comeback by the Blue Jays to beat the Red Sox 8-7 on Sunday. That was actually because I was focused on another game. I was focused on the Penguins' second afternoon game of their home stand series. I was focused on that one as they were just beginning, but I did catch as much of that game in Fort Myers as I could. Once again, the final score, Blue Jays come all the way back to beat Boston 8-7. Their next action, as they will not be playing today at the time of our recording, they will not be playing today at 1:05 p.m. Eastern, I believe is when that was supposed to happen. The game has been canceled. They will play Detroit, however, in Dunedin Park, I believe, on Friday. So looking forward to that game. But speaking of Dunedin, they have two games in Dunedin on Tuesday and Wednesday. They'll play against St. Louis, and they will play against Philadelphia as well. Philadelphia on Wednesday, they'll play against the Cardinals on Tuesday, which is tomorrow at the time of our recording. And by the time we are done with this show, those matchups will probably be in the rearview mirror, and we'll be getting ready for the Baltimore game against the Orioles. Or we'll have to wait for another one. Speaking of the Baltimore Orioles, they will play the Blue Jays in Toronto to kick off the new season. When it kicks off in a couple of days' time, next month, we will try our very best to get as many shows to you as we can. And perhaps we will get you our end of the month March show on the week of that. Homestand to kickstart the season. Perhaps we will use one of the 3 off days before the season to record that show. That will drop on the 27th of March. And these shows are pre-recorded. They won't be live streamed, especially with a lot of baseball going. If it lands when the Blue Jays are on the road, perhaps we will live stream a show, but you never know. All right. Still to come for the Blue Jays before we wrap it up here on this one, before we wrap up this segment. They will have St. Louis on Tuesday in TD Park. They will play the Philadelphia Phillies on Wednesday. They are playing against Baltimore on Thursday at 1:05 p.m. Weather permitting. We'll see what the weather has in store on that day. They will play a split squad game on Friday in Dunedin, Florida against Detroit. And the next squad game, the other squad game, I should say, one squad will be playing in Dunedin. The other squad will be playing in the Bronx against the Yankees. The Blue Jays will kick off their spring training in March with a visit to Atlanta on Saturday, a showdown against Philly on Sunday, and a showdown where they were canceled today at the time of our recording. They will take on the Detroit Tigers at 1:05 on March 3rd, 2025. All right. Going to go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, time to talk podcasts. Shoutouts of the month. And then the moment you've all been waiting for, we're going to talk about my thoughts on the Super Bowl game. And I'm going to give you some of my thoughts that will be extended thoughts on Penguins post-game for the Penguins and the Rangers game. As we also take a look at the Penguins schedule before wrapping up with last call, where we're going to preview what else could be on tap on the next episode of Weekly in Sports. All right. So don't you dare miss it. We'll be right back in just a moment.
SienaT Radio will never give you up. They will never let you down. Nor will they run around or desert you. So join Nick Astley for The Melting Pot every Saturday on SienaT Radio. Hang on a minute. He's not Nick Astley. Oh, jings, I've done it wrong. Anyway, just join Nick for The Melting Pot on SienaT Radio.
Hello? How are you, my friend? Why? What's the matter? Why feeling bored and lonely? Look! Look at me! I am always happy. The only reason? I can tell you, it's because I listen to SienaT Radio. All the best shows you can think of. The Melting Pot, the Cosmopolitan Culture Club, and the Song Bank. There are also many more new shows to come. Please make sure to visit her website at http://sienat.wordpress.com/sienat-radio. Oh, now I can hear you more cheerful. SienaT Radio, making your day brighter, one song at a time.
Welcome back to Weekly in Sports. End of the month February program. I forgot to mention that we were in the end of the month February program. And with all of this all being said, we roll on. We talked about the Elimination Chamber. I talked about a little bit of baseball. I gave out one of our first shout-outs of the month to the one and only Keegan Matheson. Shout out to Keegan. Shout out to my good friend Carrie as well. Look forward to seeing you guys at the season start for the Blue Jays. Let's have a great year. Want to issue out a shout out to our good friends over at SienaT Radio. Those were the people we heard from in our commercial break leading up to the shout outs of the week. This is, of course, the segment on the show where you, that's right, you at home and listening on the drive. Well, of course, if you're listening to us while you're driving, I hope that you're driving safely. Just want to quickly bring that one up. If you're listening to us on the radio or watching us on the radio, watching us on podcast, whether it's on Spotify or YouTube or whatever, I want to make sure if you're driving, you are driving with care and driving safely. This is the part of the show where you provide the predictions, not predictions, not predictions, sorry, not predictions. This is the part of the show where you provide us with your podcast recommendations for a shout out of the month. And we give them a shout out here on the air. Want to give a couple of shout outs of the month, not just to podcast for this one. We're also going to give some shout outs to content creators, like during the Penguins post-game show. I really don't want to spoil too much more about that, but from the Capital side, but I do want to let everyone know that I do want to let everyone listening to the show know that we have given out some great shout outs to guys like Paul Steigerwald, Josh Getzoff, Joe Brand, etc. We're going to give a shout out to some of the baseball crew in front of the Toronto Blue Jays, which is why our first shout out when it comes to podcasting goes to Mike Wilner. Mike, you do an absolutely amazing job with the podcast. With the podcast Deep Left Field, you do an absolutely amazing job doing that. I love listening to it every Thursday that I get an opportunity to do so. Haven't been able to as of late, but that's okay. I'm working on it. And I do look forward to all those interviews that you do. Might even consider doing it for Sports for Beginners or even for Weekly in Sports. But all things considered, Mike, you do an excellent job doing the show for Toronto Star. Try to get into as many of your columns as I can, but I'm always going to be there for the show. How about we take a shout out to those behind the podcast, Bringing Home the W. Bringing Home the W is a podcast for the new team they call the Toronto Tempo. That's correct. It's Bringing Home the W, a podcast for the Toronto Tempo. And I personally enjoy the show, so shout out to the podcast's creators. Shout out to the podcast itself. And I'm looking forward to watching the inaugural season as someone who doesn't pay a lot of attention to the WNBA. You can bet, and this might alter a lot of our content on Sports for Beginners, but you can bet I'm going to try to check out what's going down on the court with the Toronto Tempo. You can bet I'm going to try to check that out as many times as I can. So shout out to host of the program, Tanya Casso Giovanni. Tanya, if I pronounce the middle and last name wrong, I apologize. Josh McConnell is the co-host of this podcast. And again, it's called Bringing Home the W. We don't talk about music a lot, so I want to give a shout out to one of the artists that I listen to on Spotify. I want to give a shout out to, even though this is for podcast, we want to also include some music or whatever, but we don't do that a lot and haven't done it before. For this first go at it, I want to give a shout out to artists that I listen to under Bridget. I want to give a shout out to an artist that I listen to. And we're going to go to we're going to go to Nicki Minaj. And, oh yeah, there I go. I wanted to go with Bridget Mandelaire. Bridget Mandelaire and Nicki Minaj are going to get some shout outs here. Really love the music that you girls, I should say girls, not guys, that you girls bring on. And Nicki, one of my favorite songs from you. You know what? You could love Justin Bieber, you could hate Justin Bieber, but my one of my favorite songs from Nicki Minaj is the one that she is with Justin Bieber in. I forget what it's called, but I believe it's Beauty. Oh, there we go. Beauty and a Beat, I believe. Yeah, that's right. There we go. Beauty and a Beat. I think that's what it's called. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But I also love listening to the songs Starships, as well as Super Bass. And who could forget Ariana Grande's song with Iggy Azalea, I believe that's right. If I have that correct, pretty sure I do. But pretty sure that I do, but just in case, someone can go ahead and correct me about that. Next up, want to give a shout out to our good friend SienaT Radio. And if you are catching this on SienaT Radio, this will be a show that will air at the time of our recording on SienaT Radio as a repeat. And it will be on the podcast front on Thursdays as previously scheduled. If we go live streams, they will happen if I end up recording on Thursday, when I'm able to do so, obviously. So that might be down the road on this podcast era. With weekly in sports around hockey time. Next season, I should say, as the 2024-2025 season is still underway in the hockey season. Those will be live stream shows happening whenever the Cosmopolitan Culture Club is not happening in the evening time slots around. And we're going to go for at least 6 to 8 p.m. Or rather make it 6 to 7. Because I don't plan on the shows being too long. And those are the Eastern timeline, so that would make it 5 p.m. Central to 6 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Pacific to 4 p.m. Pacific, and of course, 11 p.m. in the UK to midnight in the UK, and midnight to 1 a.m. in France. But it'll be an afternoon program on Monday, beginning around the timeline of 12:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Central, and of course other time zones as well. I'll figure all those out, but 11:30 a.m. Central and 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Depending on how long this show is, we'll see how long it will go as a repeat. and I will be in contact with Sienna and Ali to do all that for SienaT Radio. This is a monthly show that comes your way every month on Thursdays on Sports for Beginners. And when we get set up on SienaT Radio, it will be a repeat show Thursdays, or rather Mondays, like when we're recording right now on a Monday, February 24th, 2025, in the afternoon on SienaT Radio. All right. With that all being said, Sienna and Ali are going to get a quick little shout out of the week. Want to give a shout out to good buddy Ryan Talbot, one of the hosts, I should say, of Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast, Bills Mafia, if you haven't checked that one out. I know a lot of Bills Mafia will check out shows like, I don't know, the Extra Point Show, or It's Always Game Day in Buffalo, or things like that. Which is why I want to add another shout out to our good friend, well, not a good friend, but a good friend of the Broadcast Map podcast, Sal Capaccio. I actually had a chance to listen to Sal and Ali's conversation. Really good conversation, I might add. So if you haven't already, please go check that out. And one last shout out of the week. I'm going to go this time. I would go to Joe Marino of Locked On Podcast Network for Locked On Bills, but I'm feeling giving to a girl here. No offense to the men or the women, but we're going to go to Erica Lindsay Ayala, host of Locked On Kraken, and she also is running a program on Locked On right now called the Women's Hockey Report on the Locked On Podcast Network. I believe that's available only on Locked On NHL. But we'll get Erica's thoughts on that as well as we can. And last one, I swear. We're going to give a shout to Roger Lajoie, who was on the Blue Jays Talk post-game shows for the 2 games this weekend. And I understand from Show Ali, I understand from listening to the shows that led up to the post-game shows that happened Saturday and Sunday. And, of course, now this coming weekend, we are going to have Show Ali on the weekend side. But it makes me wonder, are Blair and Barker going to be doing the weekly ones? Even though, of course, they're not going to do this one because, well, there's no game. No game today. But that makes me question it. Are Blair and Barker going to be doing it? I know they're going to do it during the season. And I know Show and whoever is going to do it on the weekends. But we'll see what we get. All things considered, shout out to the Blue Jays baseball crew that put together Blue Jays Talk. I just like to listen. I'm not really a caller. But it's a great program. Jays Talk is a great program. And Jays Talk Plus with Blake Murphy. And sometimes with Show Ali. Or whoever's able to fill in for Blake. Still a great show. I understand Blake has now been involved with the Toronto Raptors, but we'll talk about them on the next episode of Weekly in Sports because I want to keep things going here. All right. Now that the shout-outs of the month are out of the way, let's transition over to talking all things, and I say all things. Let's transition to talking all things Penguins. Oh, shoot, I'm forgetting. I want to give my thoughts on the Super Bowl Sunday matchup. Want to make sure I get that. Want to make sure I get that in there. Want to make sure I get it in there. All right, quickly. This was a game, this ball game right here for a chance for a three-peat. Yeah, got to give credit to Jalen Hurts where credit is due. But this was a game where Patrick Mahomes was trying to find himself, but never mind find himself. To me, this was a game where I think the pressure got to Patrick and the Chiefs going for a three-peat. But in listening to the post-game media availability, it stings when you lose, especially when you lose a game when you're about to win the whole dang thing for the third straight season, and they were unable to get it done. Your final score, as everyone already knows, especially if you follow football, all the way to the championship game at Super Bowl 59. Eagles 40, Chiefs 22. Eagles win their second Super Bowl in franchise history, and they halt the Kansas City Chiefs, who were on a three-peat, and became the first team in NFL history in the Super Bowl era to go on a three-peat and make it to the Super Bowl, but fall in the Super Bowl. They are the only team who have had a three-peat going and lost in the Super Bowl to this point in the Super Bowl era. All right, we quickly got that in. So let's give you some thoughts from both these two games the Penguins have played as of late. Reminder, Penguins postgame will come your way on Wednesday and on Friday this week. So it will be a double dose here, but I'll record a next episode of Sports for Beginners on Sports for Beginners coming up on our Thursday today, ahead of that second game against the Philadelphia Flyers in a home-and-home series. Wednesday will be a Penguins post-game show. And Friday, if we're not able to record on Thursday night, Penguins post-game, that will be a Penguins post-game show Friday. All right. With that all said and done, let's get to some of my thoughts on this game. First, let's get to the Capital game. Now, I'd be remissing if I said that game was a good game. No, actually, I'd be lying if I said that was a good game. That was not at all Penguins hockey at all. And not to quote the old 2-9er Phil Borg or a statement that Paul Steigerwald said on the post-game show, one of the post-game shows, but 23 games to go in the season. 23 games to go. You've now played in 59 games, 23 games to go in the season. It's not looking good for the Penguins. It's really not. It's not looking good for this Pittsburgh Penguins team. It's not looking good. But Saturday against the Capitals was by far one of the worst performances I have ever seen the Penguins play in a second period. We're very lucky we got one goal. Very lucky we got one goal. And yes, we dropped a snowball 8-3 to the Capitals, but you really can't win the game. And I know this from experience because I've experienced it when I do this on the video game. I know this from experience because I'm saying, as someone who watches hockey and also plays the video game, I tend loser. I tend to be a sore loser when it comes to the point when I just feel like something's wrong. It's either the controller or it's me. But you know what? I'll be the first to admit here that a lot of the times it's me because, first of all, a lot of the things I try to do, sometimes they don't work. So I really got to be unpredictable. And that's the thing with video games. You got to be unpredictable. But how does that relate into the game? Well, the Capitals were finding ways to, well, let me just put it this way. The Washington Capitals were able to find ways to convert on turnovers by the Pittsburgh Penguins. And we lost 8-3 to the Capitals. Well, that's better than losing. No offense to the New York Rangers, who defeated us 5-3 yesterday at the time of our recording. Of course, by the time this drops, this will be as of Sunday. And we'll be getting ready for matchup number 2 against the Philadelphia Flyers. But all things considered, the New York Rangers were pounced. They were pounced by the Buffalo Sabres before they came into action against the Pittsburgh Penguins on a 3-game road trip as they are currently on right now, which wraps up on Tuesday, and will have wrapped up by the time you hear this show. They beat us 5-3, but they got trounced. Sorry, not trounced. They got clobbered 8-2. Well, I'll take 8-3 or 8-4 over 8-2 any day of the week. The Penguins lost that season series to the New York Rangers 3-1. Yeah, 3-1. That makes sense. But they could have evened the season series if they could have found a way to put puck on net and get the puck in the net. All right. I don't want to spill too many more thoughts on the Rangers game, but let's just get better against Philadelphia and control what we can control. 23 games left in the season. And ladies and gentlemen, that'll bring us to the closing moments of today's program. So we've talked about the Super Bowl. We talked about Pittsburgh hockey. We talked about WWE Elimination Chamber. We've talked about Blue Jays baseball. And I'm very, very excited for that when it returns. So I'm not going to tease very much on this episode of Weekly in Sports, because that's what this is. This is not Sports for Beginners. This is Weekly in Sports. But I will say this. As far as our Blue Jay schedule goes in spring training, we'll get, as I mentioned earlier, we'll get the Cardinals tomorrow. At the time of our recording, it will be final by the time the show drops. Probably. Depends on what the weather is like in Dunedin. We'll have the Philadelphia Phillies on Wednesday. Probably going to be final, most likely, when we hit this show on the air. The one game that won't be final by the time this show hits the air is Baltimore versus Toronto. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we've got a split squad game, Detroit and the Yankees, to end the month of March. Atlanta, Philadelphia, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Boston. I was going to say Buffalo, but make that Boston, excuse me. Then the Yankees, I should say again. That one's a night game at 6:35 p.m. Eastern, 5:35 p.m. Central. And of course, we also will see Philadelphia and Detroit in a split squad game on the first Saturday. Well, actually, I should say the second Saturday of the month of March. That will be Philadelphia and Detroit on March 8th, 2025. Blue Jays game recap returns after the first homestand of the new season. Thoughts on the Baltimore series, which is a 4-game series, and thoughts on the Washington Nationals series, all coming up as they will take place on the Blue Jays game recap first show that will take place on Thursday, March 3rd. We're going to try to drop that. We're going to try to record after the Washington Nationals game and get that out to you as early as maybe Friday morning or as early as 7 p.m. on Thursday night, April the 3rd. We get ready for the Mets, Boston, and Baltimore as well again. But all things considered, my name is Scott McGregor. That is going to do it for another monthly episode of Weekly in Sports, I should say. If you enjoyed what you've heard on the show, please consider subscribing to the podcast. I'm going to try to get the show monetized here. Please follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. If you've listened to the show on Sports for Beginners when it was on there. Now we're in the podcast era, and this is the second episode of that podcast era. So thank you so much for joining us. If you like what you heard, please consider subscribing to the Weekly in Sports with Scott YouTube channel. A link will be provided in the description of every episode. If you want the latest on the WWE, please head on over to WWE.com. If you like the Pens and want to catch the game live on the radio station, I recommend going to WXDX FM Pittsburgh, an iHeart radio station, and your home of the Penguins and the best Pens coverage, 1059 The X. And of course, if you want the latest on the Penguins, log on to, if you're in Canada, nhl.com/penguins/news, or just go straight to nhl.com/penguins. If you like the Pens, the Bills, the Blue Jays, Raptors, this is the place for you. Thank you so much to everyone for checking us out, and a warm welcome to all countries joining us on Sports for Beginners, joining us on Weekly in Sports, or whenever you see fit. My name is Scott McGregor, and until next month on Weekly in Sports, thank you so much for joining us. Before we leave, one of the big things I will mention about the next show, that will be recorded on the Monday, the 24th of March, and that will be a baseball/football/version of hockey show, as we wrap up WWE Elimination Chamber. We'll talk about who won the matches at Elimination Chamber, and of course, who is main eventing Wrestle Mania against Cody Rhodes? Was Io Sky able to knock off Rhea Ripley on Monday Night Raw when the title was on the line? And will she be main eventing WrestleMania against the women's winner of the Elimination Chamber? Or things of that nature. We'll set up the Blue Jays homestand and first road trip of the season. And of course, monthly shout-outs for podcasts, music, artists like Nicki Minaj, Bridget Melender. Bridget, if I pronounced the last name wrong, my sincerest apologies. Or people like Flo Rida, Pitbull, all those great musicians, including Canada's own Shania Twain. All that coming up on our March show. But as for now, my name is Scott McGregor. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, keep calm. Go Bills for Bills Mafia fans out there. Let's go Pens for Penguins Nation out there. And for all those Blue Jay fans, let's go Blue Jays. Go Jays, go. My name is Scott McGregor, and this has been Weekly in Sports. Thank you for joining us today for your weekly dose of sports content. If you have any questions or thoughts on this show that you'd like to let our host know about, simply send us a voice message on Anchor and let us know what you think we can improve on to help us out on the show. And remember that it is not goodbye, it is until next time. See you Wednesday.
Make me wanna